So please correct me on this then, but the doctrine of being then, that would be the what is, or the unchanging, eternal, or indivisible thing. So true reality, in a sense, would be a single, unchanging, indivisible entity.
Right. So that's my reading of Parmenides, that reality is essentially this solitary, unchanging, indivisible or invincible, perfectly complete, because not lacking anything, because there's nothing else to lack. Entity, just as like this one metaphysical entity that contains all meaning, that subsumes all meaning. And so ultimately all these adjectives that we're applying to it, like indivisible, solitary, unchanging, all those adjectives are justified by that initial observation that there just is. And so you could call that the doctrine of being. When you said true reality, that gets into some discussions, because if there just is what there is, then it's all true reality, right? There's no other reality. There is what is. There's not like a fake reality beyond what is. But if you have a more dualist interpretation of Parmenides, something you might see from a Neoplatonist like Simplicius, and of course they're going to say this is the interpretation of Plato as well, you actually have a gradation. So you may have like true reality, this unchanging, indivisible, perfect, whatnot, and then you have a realm of shadows or illusions, the path of seeming. That gets more into the fragments. That's not my reading, but yeah, if we're going to talk about a true reality, I don't believe there's a fake reality. So I never have to say the word true, but some people do that. They'll posit both true and fake realities.
If I may ask, especially for the audience, you've mentioned numerous times already that there's your interpretation. What are the main schools of thoughts that you are aware of, or interpretations of Parmenides? Like, if you could name a few of them, like the main groups.
Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, we just mentioned Simplicius, right? So you have this idea of Parmenides almost as a dualist, because we're speaking specifically about Parmenides. He writes a poem, and it's about a youth being taken by maidens on a chariot to see a goddess. And then the goddess says, I'm going to teach you two things. I'm going to teach you the steadfast heart of persuasive truth, that it is, that there is what is. And then I'm going to tell you about the opinions of mortals. And somehow these opinions have genuine existence. And so you have the three sections of the poem are going to be the proem, which is where he goes to meet the goddess. Then you're going to have the way of truth, and then you're going to have the way of seeming. And so an interpretation from Simplicius might be that the way of truth, everything that is said there, is discussing an unchanging, perfect reality or layer of reality. And then the way of seeming, where we discuss the mortal opinions, is going to be about a lesser realm, or a realm of change where things really are like shadows or illusions or appearances. And so that's one reading. You also have a very modern reading where they don't think that Parmenides is discussing reality as a whole. They don't think that this is a metaphysical or existential poem. So when I say that, I mean, when most people are reading this poem, at least historically, what they say is he's talking about existence as a whole, reality as a whole. And so what they'll say is actually what he's discussing is not reality as a whole. He's discussing what it means to be a real thing. Like, what is the criteria to be a real thing or to be a thing? And so then when we say, it has to be complete, it has to be indivisible, it has to be unchanging, etc., their interpretation would be that he's talking about this is the criteria for a given thing to be a real thing. It has to have those attributes to be a real thing. Now, again, that's another interpretation that's different from Simplicius, different from mine. The thing, when I said that I drew up that quote from Plato, or about Plato, where it's, Western philosophy is a series of footnotes to Plato, it's not really that cheeky to say Plato is a series of footnotes to Parmenides, in the sense that a lot of ink has been spilled about reading Parmenides in antiquity and today. And so there are a number of other ways of reading the poem than the two and my own. So we've given 3 so far, but there are others.
I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, continue. My apologies.
Oh, no worries. I was about to end there. I was just going to say, if people are into skeptics, for example, there's a discussion of the skeptics interpreting him their own way. Obviously, a skeptic could read him in a way where this, the stereotype of an Eleatic is to say that the senses or appearances are not trustworthy, which, in the poem they do talk about the problems with appearances. But for a skeptic who wants to doubt all of our sense perceptions and ideas, again, they have their own take on Parmenides. There's a lot of material out there.
And we discussed Plato, and you were talking about how some philosophers would say that, is the footnotes to Plato, or vice versa, Plato's the footnotes to Parmenides. But a question I was more curious on that I don't think gets talked enough, but how do you think Parmenides' philosophy compares and contrasts with other pre-Socratic philosophers, such as, let's say, Heraclitus or Anaximander, those individuals? And apologies if I butchered the last name, but I'm curious on your thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you asked that question, because there's one thing I don't advise against. Everyone approaches these texts and they read them, and over the years they get an idea for who all these people are and what they think. A common meme is sort of the Platonic meme of Heraclitus is the flux guy where you can't step in the river twice, and Parmenides is the unmoving, unchanging guy who thinks everything is one, perfectly still blob or something. And so Parmenides and Heraclitus, flux versus stasis, I guess, or static being completely unchanging. Stasis, not a good word given the Greek, but he kind of pits them together, like off each other, like they're opposites, and it's kind of almost meme tier. But I don't want to treat pre-Socratics as memes. Heraclitus, even though traditionally someone's going to say, oh, if you like Parmenides, you won't like Heraclitus, because Heraclitus says it's all in flux and Parmenides says it's not in flux. But Heraclitus has plenty of stuff that you can say is valuable and does inform some of Parmenides' thought. It's not clear who was born first. Usually we think Heraclitus is born first, but it's tough dating these people. Heraclitus does talk about opposites being unified, right? There's something that brings them together. They kind of come together. So you can't have hot without cold, and you can't have cold without hot. They kind of presuppose each other, and you can even observe that they have to be on the same scale. So they're in some sense unified. So opposites wind up being unified. There's also Heraclitus has I just want to say essentially Heraclitus is a deeper thinker than that meme, and I wouldn't want to suggest that people interpret Parmenides and Heraclitus just as that flux versus staying still meme, because I think if you look into the discussion of opposites that are in some of Heraclitus's fragments, maybe you'll find some common ground there. The one thing I do find interesting is that, Parmenides, like we were saying, is essentially considered the father of Western metaphysics. He's explicitly talking about being in its broadest sense, as long as we interpret him that way, and he's providing logical arguments, like almost like a formal logical argument. Or some people just say it is. It's like this logical argument put forward in defense of a metaphysical position. And the impact seems to have been pretty big on the people that follow him. Like if you pick up the pre-Socratic Empedocles is of course a love and strife guy. He gets the meme as a love and strife guy, where those are the two main forces that power change and the cycle of the universe. But the Empedocles, a lot of his work has actually survived in lengthy fragments. And if you read it, you'll see that he's pretty clearly mirroring Parmenides on the point of the impossibility of creation from nothing. So insofar as we want to discuss a topic like creation from nothing, or how things come to be, it seems that Parmenides had a pretty huge impact on the people that followed. Because of course Parmenides is saying there's no such thing as a generation of something new. Like reality doesn't come to be, it always is, because it just is what is. And there's no talk of becoming from what is not. So that point about how things started and how creation began, that seems to have been a huge impact from Parmenides, and you'll see it in the other pre-Socratics. But on the other hand, something you won't see in the other pre-Socratics, which is unfortunate, is that they'll try to, or they'll they'll continue to discuss change, and they don't clearly address some of the arguments you find in the Eleatic fragments about change. So they clearly will accept that we can't have creation from nothing. Like, that's just no longer a viable idea.